strategy is what you choose not to do. Being strategic is less about like a brilliant idea, and it's actually instead, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to think about that. And here's what's really difficult about this is when you run a business or you run a marketing team, you will have no shortage of people who are giving you their perspective on what you need to be doing. Usually it's coming from like a healthy place, right? But as the person dictating the strategy, I have found you have to be really resilient to deciding what will that thing be. And it's like shiny object syndrome. And you really don't have a strategy. You just want to be part of the club. Rather than really thinking about, I'm not going to do that.
All right, strategy. That's like this big idea that everybody talks about in business, but when you have a small marketing team or you're a solo marketer trying to figure out what to do and what works, it can just feel really complicated and a little bit out there, right? And so what we have done today, we brought in Blake Benz from Good Advice to talk through how do you really discuss strategy with your team? How do you form a strategy? How do you figure out what is a good thing to do as a strategy when it comes to marketing? And so he's got some great thoughts. We get into some great conversation about it, and you guys are going to love it. It's going to help you out today. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Stupid Simple Marketing Podcast. I'm Brad Alexander with Bryan Fittin here, and we have our friend Blake Benz back with us for another episode today. This podcast is designed for solo marketers or small marketing teams who want to do things that they can actually do instead of trying to copy the big boys with enterprise budgets. When your marketing team's basically Doug and Karen across the hall, you need to have stuff that'll work like today. And so that's the stuff we're talking about. And so today, we're going to dig into the strategy, which can be this big elusive word that we all like to throw around and feel smart talking about, but then you come time to do it, and you're not really sure what you're doing. So, Blake, if you didn't listen last week, Blake runs Good Advice, does coaching and consulting with businesses, helps a lot of sales and marketing strategy things. And so we thought you'd be an obvious person to have on to talk about this stuff. Welcome to the show, fellas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we booked the second episode before the first one aired. So.
I know.
So
fingers crossed, right?
Yeah. We'll see if this one sees the light of day.
If you listen to that last episode, this one's going to be way better. So,
also,
we can be very transparent. I like your show because you're very transparent. It is Monday morning. And I have some weak coffee, and so we're getting into it, though.
Yeah.
Right?
If you've ever made coffee and not put enough grounds in it, this is what it looks like. So
I thought it was like
tea.
some special blend you were doing.
Here. It's
I wasn't gonna say
kombucha.
anything.
I don't know what
I
it is.
I was actually kind of admiring that. It's funny when the whole story comes out because I was like, oh, he's got some kind of hipster coffee thing going on. And now the opinion's actually it's gone the other way now.
It's real bad.
So comments below. Tell Bryan how to make coffee. But outside of that, I'm
gonna just real quick. My wife is going to have a heyday with this because she makes such strong coffee. And I typically have to water it down a little bit. I didn't tell her for the longest time, and I finally was like,
you were
hey,
sneaking
babe.
the water in.
I was. And then, so now she makes fun of me because so she's really going to be like,
you finally make coffee that you like, right? Yeah.
that's
it is funny though in marriage, like, all three of us are married, obviously. And the things that you don't want to like stir the pot around, that's like becomes a big deal in your mind.
Yeah.
And I remember my wife and I, we were in marriage counseling, and the therapist was like, she's like, you guys need to me, she was like, you need to share all these moments that kind of bother you or get on your nerves. And I was like,
man,
I can't. There's so many. I can't. And then my wife and I, we found what worked for us.
Yeah.
But I was like, so many things are just petty in my mind, where it's like, the coffee was just, it just wasn't quite.
Yeah.
Right.
That was probably think I sound so high maintenance now. Like,
right.
This guy.
Right. This food was not warm enough. Would you please heat it back up? Right. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, and you may have a lot of those things in your marketing.
That's
are
right.
Pet peeves, and so
right.
I'm just trying to redirect.
I love it. Which usually comes around to
save me.
Well, how this goes out there is you go, tell me if this sounds familiar to you listening to this. All right, sweet. We're going to do some marketing. Cool. All right. Go throw some random crap on Facebook. Let's send out some emails. Maybe we should do like a direct mail piece. You know what we should do? We should start a podcast. Whatever it is, right?
You
get
like
all
those
these.
conversations,
Those are great.
So.
You get ideas, and then like 3 weeks later, it's not quote unquote working. And so what do? You rinse and repeat. Well, that didn't work. Let's start something new. And you kind of go, you start doing without any idea of why you're doing it. And so, which is really part of what we want to talk about for businesses that are limited budget, high expectations. Obviously, the industries are a lot. There could be a number of those things. But when it comes to just really figuring out, okay, what's the plan of attack? What's a strategy to go after on this stuff? Blake, when you were working with people in that phase or that space, when you come into that conversation, like how do you define strategy? What do you help them talk about? What do you help get out of their heads on a piece of paper so they can be effective?
I had a boss years ago who he explained, and it's always stuck with me. And then it's funny how these things you forget about, and then someone like posts it on LinkedIn, and you're like, oh my gosh, I loved that quote, and I forgot about it.
Yeah.
So I just saw this repeated, and it reminded me of it. But strategy is what you choose not to do.
Okay.
And so being strategic is less about like a brilliant idea, and it's actually instead, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to think about that. And here's what's really difficult about this is when you run a business or you run a marketing team, you will have no shortage of people who are giving you their perspective on what you need to be doing. And the tough thing about this is that sometimes the people who do that, maybe they're your boss or maybe they're someone who really cares about you. Usually it's coming from like a healthy place.
Right.
But as the person dictating the strategy, I have found you have to be really resilient to deciding what will that thing be. And it's like shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about shiny object syndrome, but a lot of us don't realize that we're living. Like think about like the thing I like to talk about with just poke fun about is how you look at these big brands, like how much of their marketing now say like AI powered or like now with AI. And I'm like, it's a toaster strudel. Like what's happening right now?
AI infused to strudel packaging.
Now part of this is like, for some of these bigger brands, a lot of it is optics. Like if they're like publicly traded and just like letting shareholders know that like we're forward facing and all that kind of stuff. But it is funny to me, like the companies that have like the AI powered on there.
Yep.
And ultimately it's not that. And I feel like I always have to say this because I think people think I hate AI and I don't. I hate what someone told me is narrow AI. It's like, it's people who are trying to shoehorn it in a way that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And so what I like to talk about is, understanding that like, yes, AI is great, but if you're just jumping on AI because everyone's talking about it, you are falling into shiny object syndrome. And you really don't have a strategy. You just want to be part of the club.
Yeah.
Rather than really thinking about, I'm not going to do that. And it's like I had someone the other day, this wasn't the day, this was like 6 months ago, where someone was like, hey, your Instagram, you don't really do anything on there. You should really, like that's a big thing, which Instagram is a big thing. It's owned by
I've heard
Facebook.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's not part of my strategy. What goes on Instagram is literally just what's reposted from LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my strategy.
Yeah.
And so when someone says, hey, what's going on? Like that's a real issue. And sometimes people will be really earnest. Like they'll be almost upset, like for you, of like, why aren't you doing this?
You're
like,
missing out on all kinds
exactly.
of opportunity.
And
right.
it's in some ways, it's not that these people are stupid. It's just that maybe it worked for them, or they're really passionate about it, or what have you.
Yeah.
I have found you really have to, if you're going to stick to a strategy, you also have to be comfortable with telling people that's not what I'm going to do, and then owning the risk around that.
Yeah.
I mean, we joked about our wives. I mean, the number of times my wife has been like, you should really be doing that. And I'm like, I think I got this. And then 6 months later, I'm just doing the thing that
you realize that you're wrong. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm like, I really should have just listened to you.
Yeah.
So, but that's part of the process. You have to own the risk, which a lot of us aren't willing to do.
Yeah. I mean, something that I'll talk with people about is when we're talking through, okay, what's the plan? What's the strategy here? Is that I'll try to get on the table is just, okay, what we got to figure out first is what does winning look like? Because what does a win look like? And then we can backtrack that to figure out what it is we're going to do, right? Mm-hmm. But so often, like you're saying, we'll go to a conference or we'll read a book, or our boss will come in with an urgent, we got to ramp up sales on this thing, whatever it is, and you got these again shiny object ideas, or I don't even call them shiny object. They're like initiatives that are shoved on your table that you don't feel like you can say no to because somebody else sits higher than you is saying they have to be done. Which you may have to still do them. I understand that. But when it comes to figuring, okay, what am I going to do here? The first thing I try to get people to answer is, okay, after all this was all said and done, whatever it is you're going to do, what's a win look like? And we got to define that as specific as possible. It's not like, we'll just have more business. That's not
Yeah, yeah.
That doesn't, that doesn't count. Like, we got to get very specific.
We had a conversation recently that was, hey, I always like the year down the road. Hey, we're gonna sit back down a year from now.
Yeah.
What are you gonna tell me that success looks like or winning looks like, whatever. And so from a marketing standpoint, I think you got to be careful about strategy with people who are not. That is not their job, right? And so when we were talking about it, somebody
That
was like,
marketing's not their job?
marketing's not
Yeah,
their job,
okay.
and that's our listener here. It's like they have them or one other person, right, that is in their marketing department. Everybody else thinks they know what marketing is.
Yeah, right.
And so one of them was like, hey, I said, what does it look like? He said, we got billboards everywhere. I'm like, whoa, that's cool. That's not me. One, I was like, that's not what we do. We're not in that space. But also, I'm like, why? Why is that? And that was like a level of, well, that's marketing. That's what success looks like.
Yeah.
And so I think from our standpoint, it's like, well, that's not part of your marketing strategy.
Yeah.
And they weren't in a marketing role. And so we were just kind of doing some surveying. And so I think from a strategy standpoint, it is very much we're not going to do billboards. We're not going to do ad campaigns right now. We're going to do paid media. We're not going to do a podcast right now. We're not going to do those things. And so because we are going to do this thing, some of the best advice I got a while back was, because I'm in the EOS world, I'm the visionary. So I have 20 new ideas a day. And that structure of, hey, that's great, Bryan, but we're going to put that on the roadmap. And then next quarter, we'll come back to this. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And it was more or less me just trying to get that stuff out. I realized, I was like, oh, I have these ideas. I just want to talk about them. But the hard part is, if I'm always telling the team every 2 days, we're going to move and we're going to change and we're going to do this, and that's just
now
not.
we're doing this.
And so not having that strategy up front of like, yes, Bryan, we're going to, but that's going to be next quarter, or that's going to be 6 months, or that's a 2026 thing.
Yeah, and it's tough too when you manage a marketing team, but you report to someone else who.
Right.
I don't want to get into like the worst case scenario, like toxic boss, but like let's say you have a very well-meaning boss, but they just don't fully understand the extent that you do. I think it's not unlike a sales conversation. It's like when I sit down with someone who's like, they run like a painting company, and they're like, I want to be #1 on Google ahead of, Cetra, whatever.
I know you're talking about.
Sorry, painting
Yeah,
company.
sorry.
They didn't sponsor the
#1,
podcast
yeah,
episode,
yeah.
So.
The green trucks? No.
But they'll name off a couple of like national brands.
Yeah.
And like, I want to be #1. And so I say, okay, great. Do you have the budget for that? And so I'm emotionally detached from it. It's just like, this is what it costs to get there. And they typically, oh, well, no, I don't. Okay, well, let's really focus on what's actually doable. And in the same way, if you report to someone, there has to be a little bit of, and I think this is what's difficult for newer marketers, is they don't understand how do you say yes to someone without telling them no.
Yeah.
It's like that's a great idea, boss. Here's what we're going to need to accomplish that. It's going to be this budget. And then the boss says, well, we don't have that budget. This is what we have. Okay, great. Well, I'm excited to use that in, like, you gotta kind of own your turf a little bit in a way, while also doing a little PR with the people who are telling you what to do. Because again, there's never any shortage. I mean, I had a friend of mine who told me he worked in a company where it was actually a big marketing company. Well, someone he didn't even report to, like he was just like walking and got into an elevator with like one of the senior VPs, and the person turned and was like, "Hey, I noticed this about the brand. Y'all really need to be doing." And like this person like has a conversation with this person like once every year, maybe.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, how do I not acquiesce, but like, hey, I appreciate
acknowledge
it, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when you're managing a team like that, you're also sort of playing the PR side of it, just so that you can really, be productive.
Yeah. Do you think that when you're trying to develop strategy for, even I'm asking that question, I say it out loud, and I'm imagining, again, that can seem like a black hole. I'm developing a strategy. We're going to create a strategy, and it sounds cool and fun, but also like nebulous and unattainable and infinitesimal. And so,
what was that last word?
Infinitesimal.
I had the same thought, dude. I was
Okay,
like, this
good,
dude is so freaking smart.
Sorry, I shouldn't have done that.
Do you ever meet someone who, this is like not razzing on you, but someone drops a word and you're just like, holy cow. And then later in the day, you try to like,
Slide that in.
Use it
Infinitesimal.
yourself, right?
But you don't, like, pronounce it
here's
right.
the other
Like,
thing,
what?
side note about being married. I'm also something called a malaprope. Okay.
Do you just do it again to us?
No, here I'm about to explain
Okay.
what this is. A
Is
malaprope.
that a palindrome?
No,
Is that a-
similar.
okay.
No, I don't know. A malaprope is somebody who confidently uses the wrong word for something else and just thinks it's what it is.
Yeah.
And so I'll slide in words all the time.
Yeah.
on what, and my wife will be like, "That's not what that means." You know,
That's me with expressions. Like, well, I'll be talking to someone, they'll talk about like their competitor who's also doing well. And I'm like, yeah, you know, like a rising tide, that's where all the boats come from. You know, and he's like, I think, is that the expression? Sure. You know?
Right. So anyway, back to what I was trying to get at before I derailed you with my intelligence. So you think strategy, and it's just a big idea, right?
Yeah.
And so, to break it down again to somebody like literally like I've never done something strategic. Maybe I have, but I don't know that I have. I'm sitting down. Okay, we got the end of quarter one's coming up, but and so I'm realizing we're already behind. We already made a bunch of mistakes, whatever. And so now, okay, cool. I need to move forward, and I feel like I need to be more strategic. Like, what are some things that you do in that situation? Are there people that need to be in that conversation, if in your team? At every levels to make sure that you're not making decisions in a vacuum and then coming back to somebody that they're just going to veto everything.
Right.
Or are you supposed to come up with it first and then pitch a case for it?
Yeah.
Those are two questions. But and even within that, like, what do you do? Like, what is it?
I think there's two separate conversations. And I think I'll table the how do you take it to a boss or how do you pitch it to a team? Because that's a whole nother conversation on building relationships internally, building trust, really owning your expertise. And there's even another nuance there of sometimes you do everything right and you have a boss that's way too involved.
Okay, so we need to have Blake back to talk about that.
I was about to say, I was like, man, there's
all right.
Because I've been in these situations.
I've talked to people too who are in that situation where ultimately their best advice is you need to go somewhere else.
Yeah, sure.
Your skill set's actually appreciated.
Right.
So that's another conversation.
Okay.
In terms of the strategy side of it, I think what I have found is that people fall either into they're overly creative and they're not enough. I use the word strategic, but really it's data driven. And then you have people who are too data driven that they're not willing to appreciate some of the nuance of the approach to marketing.
Okay.
Like these are the people who they're overly insistent on the post has to go up at 9 a.m. on a Sunday.
Right.
Like if not at that time and not at that day.
It's wrong.
Yeah. Right. Which YouTube, funny enough, YouTube, they have the big like monthly creator video that they do. And they got this question on like, what's the best time? And they were like, it literally does not matter.
Yeah.
It literally doesn't matter. Like you post it anytime. Now, if you're posting like always at 1 a.m., I don't know. Maybe it matters a little bit, right? But point being, I've found that really small teams, let's say it's like someone who's a solopreneur, this is usually someone who's overly embracing the creative side of it and they're not thinking about data. They're not thinking about what winning looks like.
Okay.
They often, a lot of times, scary enough, aren't even really sure what like their revenue numbers are like, or what their average purchase amount is, or how long someone will typically stay with them. Like these sort of like very data centric and sort of also foundational concepts around running a brand.
Yeah.
A lot of these solopreneurs don't think that way. They, in many cases, left their corporate life because they really didn't like those kinds of reports and those kinds of data sets. And so
there's
now
no heart, there's no soul.
Exactly.
Right.
But then like the longer you get into business, the more you realize like, oh, that was actually a pretty useful.
It's helpful to know that stuff.
Salesforce was actually pretty helpful despite being a nightmare. But and then on the flip side, people who are working in larger teams or they're reporting to someone, I found a lot of times it is, and I used the word sterile in our last recording, there's such a overly deliberate process to it that you're not looking at what does genuine connection look like in your content. I'm talking about not like the inspirational video, which is where like a lot of marketers go, but actually like who's engaging with the content. And this is not just social media. Now the easiest way to go there is social media, of like who's actually commenting on it, but thinking about like you put out a podcast episode and then you ran into someone who listened to it and they mentioned like, hey, I was listening to, we just had this happen. Those kinds of genuine connections, if you overly process the process, you lose the feeling and the genuine, I hate to use the word authenticity because it's so overused, but you lose sort of the soul of the content. So if you're a small business owner or you're working in a small team, you really have to appreciate both.
Yeah.
You have to appreciate, we're going to be a little scrappy about this, but we're also going to have the data that comes behind it. Because unfortunately what happens a lot of times is someone will say, oh, this really works. And you say like, oh, well, what does your revenue look like? And they're like, well, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like the old show. Well, now it's redone, but Kitchen Nightmares with Gordon Ramsay. And I like to tell the story about, it's just funny to me where he goes into a restaurant and he's like, tell me about the restaurant. And they're like, oh, we have all these customers and they love, this is their favorite dish. And then you like look at the restaurant and no one's there.
Yeah.
You know, but the owner really loves that.
They
dish.
love that dish, right?
Yeah.
So having the data set will really help you be unbiased about it.
Yeah.
But there's got to be a scrappy nature to it. It can't be so rigid that you're losing the opportunities to connect with people.
Yeah, yeah. There is a definitely a tension and a good balance of even in developing a strategy. Okay, what has worked in the past that I know worked, like some initiative, some campaign, whatever.
Yeah.
There's some for somebody in this seat. I would imagine that might be an easy place to look at some data. Is like, all right, even just we did this thing back. Did anybody buy any more of that? Whatever it was. Okay, cool. It did seem to work. All right, sweet.
Well, and here's the thing that's really interesting about data is how people will really cling on to a number. Like I was in a conversation with a guy where he was like, he's talking about his newsletter.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, we get like a 40% open rate. And I was like, okay. And he was like, well, my industry is like 35.
Right.
So
We're beating it.
we're doing pretty good.
Right.
And like how detached that is from like the actual revenue numbers of like, I mean,
Yeah.
do I really care if I have a 15% close rate, open rate, if I'm actually closing significantly more money than I would have?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right, yep.
sometimes we get so
Yep.
intent. Again, talking out of both sides of my mouth, these things are good because they can guide us where there's some gaps. But I've found that a lot of business owners, it's kind of going back to the billboard example. It's like, we want to have a billboard every 10 miles. Well, why? I don't know. I drive by them a lot. They look
Yeah.
I see Mr. Sparky on like every billboard. It's like, you know.
Yeah.
Which is I think is okay if that is the goal.
Right.
If we're just all we're doing is brand awareness. There was an attorney that a couple years ago that was like called Tim whatever, and that's why it was like his name, but you didn't really understand what it was about, so you had to visit the website. And I'm like, it had some really good stuff on it, and it was like nobody does billboards, but this guy did it really well, and it drove a certain campaign he was pushing for. So if brand awareness is your strategy of like, hey, we're not going to do anything other than we're just trying to get our name out there, with no data to back that up, rather than just like impressions, right? And so we're not looking for a conversion, then that's okay. But in the grand scheme of things, you need to know we're going to take a hit on that. We're going to lose money on this if we're not actually tracking it. So,
Well, because if strategy is what you say no to, then there has to be pain associated with that no.
Yep.
Of like, oh, I'm realizing, no, I'm not getting any traction there, or I'm losing traction there. And it's like, well, yeah, because we're putting our attention. And I think this is I think this is what is stupid simple, but also not very sexy, is there's a lot of losses in marketing. There's a lot of losses in sales. And I think people in general really love the idea of like the one-hit wonder, we did it and it worked. And unfortunately, that is not the reality.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
any person who talks about a successful marketing campaign has 10 failed ones directly behind it. And the same thing's true for sales. That big win where you're like, oh man, I closed a $20,000 sale. Well, there's a dozen behind that of people who were like, you're insane. I'm never going to buy it. You know what I'm saying? And so getting comfortable. Now, this is where it gets difficult when you're reporting to someone, because that person's signing your check.
Right.
So like there is that relationship, that PR side of it, but you have to be willing to iterate and have an honest look at your strategy and decide, is this working? Is this taking us where we need to? Or even heck, man, we committed to the billboards, and shoot, man, we're out this many dollars, and it's been a year, but we got to pivot. We got to try something else.
Right.
Well, and I think the best advice I got was it was good advice. It wasn't
Not great advice.
Yeah.
But everything's an experiment. Like everything is an experiment, especially in marketing.
Yeah.
And you can go too far on the other side of like, well, it just doesn't matter. And we're just, we've got money to burn apparently, and that's our marketing budget.
Yeah.
It's not that. It is very much a iterate often, like you said. Like we're figuring this out. We're trying to see what works, and we need to see when something's failing. Okay, we're not going to do that anymore.
I think also like it's hard because we have such like an influencer driven social media culture. That when people have those success stories, they really they like bring down the fact that they were trying to figure it out. It's like, oh, well, we looked at our market analysis and we knew that our competitors were spending this many dollars. So we knew and they make it sound so simple. And I guarantee you, especially for people listening, 99% of the time, that's not the case.
Right.
And or
they're distilling like 2 years of failure into one moment that finally worked, but it took them 2 years to figure that out.
Well, and there's also recency bias. So a lot of times we forget. Like I was talking to my wife last year, we had like this really tough season of like 3 months where like the sales weren't happening, and I was like, "This is the hardest time of my business." And she was like, that's what you said like last year. Like,
I feel like we say this
And
every,
it was,
every year.
but also,
it just keeps
This
getting
is
worse.
new. Right.
But it is funny how like you forget, or we were just talking about, we have a baby on the way, and I was talking to my wife, and I was like, man, I hope I can like spend as much time as I did with our first kid, because like that was such a special time. And she was like that was COVID and everything was shut down.
Yeah.
And like the government sent you money.
Right.
Like you didn't have to do
Everybody
anything.
was spending time with everybody.
So
right?
yeah. So I mean, that is recency bias of like you realize that. Actually, now that I'm saying it, I'm sure someone's gonna come and be like, "That's not recency bias."
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the opposite. But point being, a lot of times we don't realize all the skill sets that made something work. Or like, there's this guy I like to not publicly shame, but he runs a very successful marketing company, tens of millions of dollars, does very well for himself, and this is the marketer that I bought from when I started my business and had a really bad experience with. But point being, as I was engaging with this guy, he was like, yeah, I mean, this is, you just send this one email or you just, write this one ad and it's so simple. Well, came to find out this was like year 15 for this guy in marketing, and he had just become super successful like the year before.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
And so I was like, kind of like reflecting. First, I was mad because I had spent all this money, but I was also like, if you didn't ever talk about like those first 12, 13 years. And so sometimes we do a marketing strategy and we're like, oh, it was so simple, it worked. And us as like people learning or observing, we don't realize all the history behind that decision. And not just history, but timing, which is a big piece of it. The timing that made that work.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, something that I like to make sure we bring it back to with the strategic conversation is really, some sort of compass in the middle. Like, this is kind of what we're just trying to achieve as a company in general. And this is not like your mission statement. This isn't. This is, for me in my world, this is very much like, okay, what are the phases of your customer journey buying cycle? And there's about 8 different movements in there. We'll talk about that some other episode. But within that, like, we'll help pick strategy based on what's weak right now in the, like, what step of that is just deficient. Okay, cool. Let's focus on that for 3 months. Let's focus on that for 6 months. Let's focus on that all year long, whatever it is. And then you kind of shore that up, but you have a holistic picture of kind of what are we trying to build from start to finish, from people didn't know that I existed all the way to they love me and they're telling people they're raving fans of me. But there's all these steps that go along in there. And so there's something you can return to over and over again to reevaluate. How are we doing? What are we gaining traction? And so if you know what, we got this sales system pretty tight. Somebody calls us, we get on a call with them, and like 70% of the time they're saying yes. Cool, let's go buy the billboards now, because we got a system down. They show up that we're going to be able to do a good job of selling them. But so let's do all that stuff to get more awareness. We can spend money there, and then the results that we have realistic expectations of what we're trying to get, as opposed to let's buy a bunch of billboards, but we're terrible on a sales call, and then you're mad that the marketing didn't work.
Yeah,
that's
or
not,
that 90% of your current customers didn't come from like the cold.
Yes,
it's like a referral based business.
Right,
so
right.
It's like, okay, are you intentionally trying to build out a new lead funnel?
Right.
Or do you just like billboards?
Right. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
A lot of us,
Which you can.
That's what it is. It's like, oh, well, why didn't the billboards work? Well, none of your customers come from the billboards or that kind of growth.
Turns
channel.
out 90% of the people you know right now were friends of somebody else, right? Let's go meet more of those guys. Yeah.
Yep.
Or more of those women.
Well, hey, Blake, thanks for being on again.
Yeah,
this was fantastic. This was a good conversation, and I hope you guys took away some tactical, practical things from this show. And also, we're going to talk more about strategy, talk more about content, and talk more about branding and messaging. And so we'll have to have you back. We talk. I definitely want to dive into the how do you present things to your boss and how because those are the conversations that we have with our clients as well. It's like, I really want to do this, but budget hasn't been approved, and I really want to figure out how to get the budget approved. So I think that'll be a great episode. So, but thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, absolutely, man.